On February 6th of 2023, headlines broke through the NBA as Kyrie Irving was traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic, one of the most sensational young ballers, was finally going to have another superstar on his team. He was going to team up with Uncle Drew himself. Well, what was excitement, what was buzzing, what was Hollywood box office has now turned into nothing but a nightmare. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than being in a position where you need to win games, only to end up losing back-to-back games to one of the worst teams in the league, the Charlotte Hornets, who are without their best player in LaMelo Ball. This all led to the saddest moment I've ever seen Luka in his young 5-year career.
Sometimes I don't feel it's me. I'm just being out there. I used to have really fun, smiling on court, but it's just been so frustrating.
Ladies and gentlemen, things aren't looking good for Luka, Kyrie, and the Dallas Mavericks. Having Kyrie Irving on a basketball team is extremely confusing. In fact, I don't think there's a more confusing player in the entire NBA than Uncle Drew, and here's what I mean. If we just look at his numbers, this dude is a flat-out superstar. 27 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists on elite shooting splits that are just a hair shy of 50, 40, and 90. Then on top of that, he's box office. People pay top dollar to see him perform, and when he's on the court, he rarely disappoints. He's the best ball handler in NBA history by a mile. I mean, his ability to slither between defenses and get all the way to the rim, then finish in traffic, is second to nobody. Then on top of that, he has an outside shot and the mid-range shot in his toolbox. I think it's pretty fair to say that from an offensive standpoint, Kyrie Irving is in the conversation for the most skilled player in NBA history. Then in regards to him as a person off the basketball court, he's arguably one of the most generous as well. I mean, in the past year alone, he's donated $323,000 to Feeding America, partnered with City Harvest to ensure that 250,000 meals were distributed to New Yorkers, partnered with Nike to donate 17 pallets of food and masks to the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, committed $1.5 million to help WNBA players who opted out of the 2020 season, paid off the college tuition of 9 HBCU students from Lincoln University, and he also purchased a house for the family of George Floyd. So, just from looking at his resume, he's one of the best basketball players in the world, and he gives back generously to society. But yet, in the NBA world, somehow, he leaves a bit of destruction everywhere he goes. I mean, let me quickly summarize what happened in his career so far. He blindsided the Cavaliers with a trade to the Celtics back in 2017 and also shot some shade towards LeBron's direction. Then, when he was in Boston, a ton of stuff happened, including butting heads with Celtic star Jaylen Brown. He also told the media at the time, "If you guys will have me back, I plan on re-signing here." But then, as we all know, he eventually ditched town and went to Brooklyn to team up with Durant. Then, when he was in Brooklyn, he didn't get along with former MVP teammate James Harden, which eventually forced their hands into the Ben Simmons trade, and not too long after that, he got into a huge war with Nets owner Joe Tsai, which is arguably the ugliest owner-player situation that has happened in the last 20 years. Well, after that, as we all know, he was traded to the Dallas Mavericks. So let me tell you something that you might not already know. Before this trade took place, the Mavericks were 3 games above 500, good enough for 5th in the West. Well, almost 2 months into the trade, they're now 3 games below 500 and 11th in the West. They're not even in the play-in picture at this exact moment. Sheesh, guys. If someone told me at the beginning of the year that OKC and the Pelicans and the Timberwolves would be higher than the Mavericks in the standings as the year was closing out, I would have said, that's crazy. And then to make things worse, you got the Mavericks star Luka Doncic saying that he's not smiling in games and he's not having fun anymore. From a basketball standpoint, the Mavericks have hit pretty much rock bottom. You know, I'm not saying Kyrie is the root of everything, but this is just the facts of what's going on right now in Dallas. This is the Kyrie conundrum, and here's why the Mavericks are in big trouble. First off, at this current rate, they're most certainly not going to get a guaranteed playoff position. With only a handful of games left, the best they could possibly hope for is to just get a play-in position, which is ridiculous since they were in the conference finals just 1 year ago and have one of the best players in the game today, Luka Doncic. Then on that same side of the coin, if they fail to make the playoffs or play in, I'm sure the media is going to blame Kyrie, and since he'll be an unrestricted free agent during the offseason, there's a high chance that he's going to head over to LA, which was his preferred destination from the get-go. The Mavericks, in turn, would have lost two good pieces in Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, whom they had to give up to acquire the All-Star guard. This has got to be Mark Cuban's worst nightmare, because where would the Mavericks go from here if that happened? Seriously, where would they go? In the past year, they would have lost three key members of their conference finals run, including Jalen Brunson, whom they completely fumbled because they didn't want to pay him for some odd reason. Man, they really messed up with him. I mean, he's now brought the Knicks into playoff contention while averaging all-star statistics. Anyway, this leads to the all-important question. Are the Dallas Mavericks now at risk of losing Luka as well? Well, the answer is yes. We'll see how this all plays out, but the truth is, the guard from Slovenia is now in his 5th year in the NBA. Up until this year, he's been given a pass every time he was knocked out of the playoffs because he was young. But now that he'll be nearing his prime, with the Mavericks roster just getting worse and worse, what is he supposed to do? I mean, honestly, if Kyrie leaves, where can Luka possibly go from here? The 2023 list of free agents honestly doesn't look too promising either. I mean, just looking at the list, the best they can hope for is probably Fred VanVleet, but only if they pay him the max contract, I guess. And as good as VanVleet is, Jalen Brunson probably would have been the better guard for them. Then when it comes to the trade market, they probably won't get anything good either because, let's be real, they don't have a lot to offer. I mean, Kyrie, Christian Wood, and Markieff Morris are all headed into free agency, and whatever way you look at it, it just seems that they fumbled their roster, especially when you take into consideration that they're getting older too. I mean, their rim-running center, Dwight Powell, will be turning 32 next season. Their other center, Maxi Kleber, will also be 32. Then one of their better defenders, Reggie Bullock, will be turning 33. In other words, pretty much all the role players will be going into the tail end of their prime. If Luka plays with this roster next year, he's literally going to be a one-man army, complaining about every non-call in the game, and he's going to go from potentially the next Larry Bird to just another dude who couldn't win a ring. It might be a hard pill to swallow, but at this point, all things point to Luka eventually forcing his way out of Dallas. I mean, it's what his favorite player LeBron did after playing 7 seasons with lackluster talent in Cleveland, but man, even after saying that, I can't imagine Luka wearing any other jersey but a Mavs jersey. It'd just be too weird. Anyway, I want to touch back on Kyrie as well because honestly, he's put himself in quite a predicament as well. Here's what I'm talking about. He's currently 31 years old, and aside from the bad taste that he's left his previous organizations with, his injuries are starting to pile up. I mean, foot injuries, calf injuries, back injuries, abductor injuries, they're starting to take a toll on him. Then when it comes to contracts, he's probably going to want the 4-year maximum $200 million-ish deal that every other superstar is getting, but who's going to want to pay him that? I mean, rebuilding teams would rather invest in a younger prospect, and championship teams, on the other hand, probably wouldn't want to take the gamble of having Kyrie based on his history. The only team he'll literally have a chance to go to is the Lakers, which is completely ironic because the reason why he left the Cavaliers in the first place was so that he could get out of LeBron's shadow and be the man on the team. Sheesh, guys. At this point, LeBron is literally like Thanos.
You could not live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.